Uh, Good evening and a warm welcome to each one of you to the first session of our RC this year in 2026. We are, of course, delighted to host this in collaboration with the Research Committee on Food, Culture and Society. And I welcome Dr. Rituparna, who is the convener and architect of ADHOC RC3. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'm Leena, convener of the ADHOC RC on Pedagogy, Teaching and Learning. This RC was formed in 2024 and we've just completed 2 years. In fact, we are now a full-fledged research committee, but we await an official confirmation from ISS, Indian Sociological Society. Just very briefly to tell you about the research committee. We aim to provide an enabling space to listen to and have conversations around theoretical and empirical work, methods and methodologies, teaching practices, and reflections related to the broader fields of teaching and learning. Sociology. We focus a lot on the classroom because we believe that, the classroom, despite its enormous challenges, can also be a space of immense possibilities. But for us, of course, the classroom is not just the typical classroom. I mean, we move beyond that, look at other sides of learning as well. And of course, today, the session on food is something that we have been looking forward to. Food, as we all know, evokes a range of emotions and meanings. For some of us during our growing up years, I think food was about taste, celebration of the richness and diversity, rituals of people coming together. But somewhere along the way, we also learned that food was also about a series of exclusions around gender, caste, class, region, and religion. For some of us, and these are the narratives that we often hear from our students, it may be a reminder of, what could I possibly carry in my tiffin box during my school years, so as to find acceptance among peers, and what must I necessarily avoid to escape ridicule and shame. Or simply it's a coexistence of both. It's never a binary of this or that. These are series of emotions and feelings around food. But what happens really, and these are some of the questions that we are asking today, what happens when food becomes a subject of critical inquiry in the classroom? Food is deeply personal and also systemic and structural. And so what happens when we start discussing about food in the classroom? What are the different pedagogies that stimulate critical conversations on food and the politics around it? As one of the protagonists in a short documentary on food says, and I quote him, "Khane ko sirf khane ki tarah dekho." But this is a question that we raise today. Can food simply be about food? I think this session and our speakers will provide much food for thought. And I welcome our speakers, Ishita and Ayeshna Dutta. And who better than Rituparna to moderate this session? As you would all know, she's assistant professor at IIT Guwahati, co-founder of Doing Sociology, has a series of publications on food, including a just released book on food, culture and society in India. May I now invite Rituparna to take the session forward.
Thank you, Professor Pujari, and I'm extremely grateful to you for creating this session, putting all this ideation into it. And I'm also very delighted to introduce both our speakers. So the plan of implementation is that I will introduce them very briefly and then invite each of them to share their reflections in 10 to 12 minutes, and then we will open up the floor for a discussion and question and answer session. So I first introduce Ayeshna, who teaches in the Department of Sociology at KC College, where her pedagogical approach is rooted in dialogue, critical inquiry, and the transformative potential of the classroom. She is currently pursuing her PhD, exploring the experiential realities of women in relation to gaps in medical knowledge and practice, particularly the disjuncture between clinical approaches to PCOS and women's lived embodied experiences of the condition. Deeply invested in employing feminist, passionate pedagogies, she approaches teaching as a collaborative and evolving process, attentive to the plurality of student experiences and the possibilities they generate. She also teaches papers in food, bringing an interdisciplinary lens to the subject, and is deeply passionate about food, not only as a site of culture and identity, but as a pedagogical tool to establish and hope and oneness in the classroom. Ayeshna is also a member of our ad hoc group 3, Food, Culture and Society of the Indian Sociological Society. Let me also take this moment to congratulate Professor Pujari and the others of ad hoc group 1 on becoming an RC. And we hope that our food ad hoc group will also become an RC very soon. Ayeshna, I know that you have many interesting insights that we have informally spoken about earlier. So thank you so much for taking the time out to do this. And yes, please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen. At the very beginning, I would like to thank Indian Sociological Society, Professor Leena and Dr. Rituparna for having me on board, and to Dr. Ishita for agreeing to share this panel with me. I have been reading her work and, of course, Rituparna's. And as compared to them, I am very, very new into the field of food studies. But what I'm going to speak today is mostly based on my experiences and reflections of teaching two papers, one on popular culture, where food has been a very, very important module, and one on food culture and society. Um, Food, as we know, is uh, personal and political. My interest in teaching food, of course, came from the urge to teach and do research on something that has been very important in my personal life, which is food. Anyone who knows me also knows that I have a very personal and rather intimate relationship with food, which probably stems from me coming from a Bengali family and probably belonging to Kolkata, which is a city of different food histories. But it also is connected with the discipline of sociology and how it gives me a lens and a discourse to finally articulate and analyze. As a sociology teacher, the world around us can be sometimes, most of the times, very, very disenchanting, but the classroom is where we can find resistance and a voice. Teaching food inside the classroom and taking it beyond the classroom has become a way in which we can find hope in a world where hope is fading and leading us to uncaring spaces. I think this has been reflected by me and my students who have, without fail, tried to, hold up to the spirit of food by engaging themselves with the courses critically. Now, this paper, I would just like to share that this paper that I teach in KC College is titled as Food, Culture and Society. Right now, we are teaching the paper as minor and is scheduled at 7:30 a.m. in the morning, 4 days a week. But what really has been the first step in thinking about food studies is the interest and the curiosity that students have shown in learning this paper, catching up and reading rigorously. And mostly I was teaching psychology and English major students, but according to them this paper has been something that they've really enjoyed in that semester. So for sure there is something about food that can clasp and buckle students interest and attention is class. um, Entering the classroom as a feminist teacher, my question to myself and to everyone else who teaches food studies is where the pedagogue must have interest in the field of food studies, or should they really be passionate about food themselves? Also, is being foodie enough as a teacher to teach sociology of food? The answer to that question, according to me, is complex. One really has to be equipped and prepared to sociologically read and write food and to uncover food that is unknown, food that is stigmatized, and food that is socially constructed as dirty in a way in which the classroom remains a democratic space and does not get polarized. Therefore, positionality of the pedagogue and placing the self in an ethics of care becomes fundamental, especially from the voice of being a feminist pedagogue. How do I place the self, which is me, which is also a critical self within the classroom, where I know that people have ideas that differ from me drastically. Food is personal, religious, and culturally sentimental. And learners today too belong to a generation, which is largely moving towards vegetarianism culturally or veganism because they follow pop culture. So, something that maybe I don't agree with, but how do I then provide support and create an effective mentoring in the class with the disagreements and the debates? Therefore, democratizing teaching practices in terms of designing the curriculum, designing assignments, and thinking about what we are introducing in the classroom is very important. So, often certain things that I did with these courses is that the first class of food culture society would start with a short exercise on what they would cook for their friends if they come home as guests. What would they serve on a plate? And this activity that was conducted in pairs made them think about why certain things get served while others don't. Then to interchange their positions and discuss intersectionally to understand how class, gender, caste, ethnicity all shape food and what we eat. The next thing that I did with my students is to write, a narrative short piece of around 500 words on what they like eating. And they had to do a short research on where the food has originated in, describing its taste in their own native language, and to write about how it would have traveled to your plate, almost tracing the social life of food. Simple questions in the classroom like what do you eat have the potential of sparking long and critical discussions about how food is not just about what we eat, but about the entire society at large. Food soon became understood as a social construct, not just food, but its elements of taste, smell, visual aesthetics. Everything was co read together critically. The debates in the classroom moved beyond the dualities of vegetarianism versus non vegetarianism, shifted to the everyday and complex phenomena of exploring how identities are formed through food and vice versa. Teaching food has the potential of breaking down, complex sociological concepts into relatable themes. For example, a discussion in the classroom about a shawarma or Mumbai's own Irani chai, vada pav, sushi, eating octopus, red ant chutney, Mumbai street food and how it is turning into a fusion food to maneuver its taste. Might seem like we are just talking about food, but what I was actually teaching inside and outside of the classroom were themes in critical caste studies, indigeneity, diversity of cultures, global food cultures, urbanism, critical digital cultures, etc. Definitely, this can be very, very challenging, but it helps in also transgressing the boundaries of a college classroom where theories are read and taught in a particular way. As part of democratizing my own teaching practices and to explore food with students, food walks became part of internal assignments where students planned, organized, read, and conducted food walks with me as their mentor. Now, what I call food walks is, an embodied knowledge making practice. Recently, even Professor Rukmini has written on the act of walking as a pedagogical exercise, which has, been very, very helpful for this as well. But the act of walking is social and a feminist pedagogic enterprise. The act of walking together as a creative learning exercise has been very, very enriching. Walking as an immersive embodied knowledge making exercise where understanding is not just grounded in theory but also in bodily experience. And since this experience is about exploring food, the sensory elements and the socio-political milieu underprops food walking and makes it about meaning making that is enhanced through sensory affect. This, therefore, can be a transformative tool that also challenges the idea that learning about food is only possible in a classroom. Walking to explore food in Mumbai is to run into stories of migration and the past. Um, Something like vada pav that is so mundane is sociologically read when you realize how the batata and the pav first entered and why there was a need to cook something like that in a rapidly growing industrial city. Or observing that a South Indian restaurant might serve something like a Brahmin idli talks about how what we know as cuisine is the food that belongs to Apoka's Tamil Brahmins. Digging into the berry pulao, which is available at a very old Iranian restaurant, understanding the execution of Zoroastrians and understanding how ingredients is not just about culinary invention, but how it's also about memory. So here, food becomes about reflection, memory, cultural exchange, and social relationships of power. The next thing that I would just like to shift the focus to is how, as a pedagogic practice, what has to be incorporated in the classroom with our students is uh, digital food cultures, because there is so much about food in the online space, and because the online space is also a space where uh, our students are available there all the time. The other thing that can really build food studies and help us in rethinking about our own pedagogical interventions is using digital cultures to teach food. Moving on to digital cultures, for example, of course, beyond films, documentaries, and web content, things like food vlogging, YouTube videos, cooking shows, different other types of digital content creates a participative ethos in the classroom. Digital cultures of food and students' engagements with food online, watching cooking shows, mukbang videos, food bloggers, and unfamiliar food was both challenging, but one of the best experiences of teaching this paper also. Although faced with significant resistance and disagreements, because there were times when students were really uncomfortable watching something on the screen, but with time, I think they also have got comfortable and have watched and discussed all of these together with me. Digital cultures of food and critically reading food online helped, as reading was to be done virtually. The sense of time, space, and sensory elements do not function in the same way. So, in that context, transgressing is often possible because somewhere students accept and they watch it because they know that they would not actually have to eat it. We are just discussing. There is a vast world of food networks online that can be explored to teach food studies. And by now, we already know that, how much food is political. But using feminist pedagogic practices to teach about food has meant for me to bringing in affect in the classroom. One must not think that food creates boundaries, because there is so much of different things that we are, sort of discussing. In fact, it is in this classroom that I find hope, hope for a better world, to establish oneness and understand the true meaning of the ideas that we teach in sociology, learn in sociology, of how to be social, how to be human, moving beyond, of course, difference and hate, and creating a possibilities for a world of justice and acceptance. And with that, I would like to stop here.
Thank you, Ayeshna, for that
Thank
very,
you.
very,
I was on time.
evocative presentation. You set the tone for perhaps the discussion that will follow. I also appreciate how you find hope in food, because this has been a common theme that there's so much interest in the course, the subject, and the discipline that, it propels all of us to work more and harder. Thank you so much. I will now call upon our second speaker, and very briefly, I'll introduce her. Many of you will know Dr. Ishita De, who has also contributed to the ad hoc group 3 immensely through her participation. And she is a food sociologist, as I would like to introduce her. She is an assistant professor at the Department of Sociology, Faculty of Social Sciences, South Asian University, New Delhi. She is the author of Sweet Access, Crafting Mishti in Bengal, recently published by Routledge. Her research interests are food, labor, and census. She showcased her art installation titled Smell Trace as part of Serendipity Arts Festival 2026 She has co-anchored an art research project on smells of the city with a focus on Delhi, supported by the Kiran Nadar Museum of Art, Delhi, and collaborated on an art installation, Dawakhana, as part of Seema Kohli's solo show, Khula Asman. She is the co-editor of Society and Culture in South Asia, SAGE, editorial collective member of Gastronomica, University of California Press, and is a contributor to Oxford Compendium to Sugar and Sweets and journals such as Contributions to Indian Sociology, South Atlantic Quarterly, The Sense and Society, Gastronomica, etc. She has also co-edited a book, Sustainability of Rights After Globalization, and co-authored a book, Beyond Kolkata, The Dystopia of Urban Imagination. Currently, she is working on train journeys and food. Ishita, I welcome you to the discussion, and please go ahead with your remarks.
I just shared, and it will get uploaded because I know many of us may not have access to the current issues of Gastronomica on JSTOR. What I shared on your chat box, take some time to download it, because this is where 5 of us came together from different parts of the globe to actually write about how do we decenter food pedagogies. Thank you so much, Dr. Patgiri and Professor Pujari, for making this happen. This was, I think, long overdue, because let me first flag that, it's not that food is not taught in Indian sociology classrooms, right? Sociology of India course, social stratification, agrarian sociology, right? I mean, those of us who did agrarian sociology would be familiar particularly with the mode of production debate. So it's not that food has not been central to our sociology courses, right? From the village studies, we have the rich scholarship that is emerging on commensality, on interdining practices, and really making us look at food through what are the theoretical tropes that we can use. I think the first sort of shift that comes for us to reimagine food studies in a slightly different way is with Manpreet Janeja's publication on everyday Bengali food, where she looks at food as an actant and how do we reimagine food in everyday lives. I think this particular scholarship, and I mention this because when we really think about doing a course on food within the Indian context, it is also important to have, like Dr. Dutta already pointed out, a gamut of literature to talk to. And what is the literature that we can borrow and we can source from? The title of my course, there are 2 courses I have taught on food in 2 different contexts. From 2016-17 till about 2018, I taught the course on food. I taught an elective course on food as part of an undergraduate program in Ambedkar University, Delhi. Interestingly, this is one course that had a lot of takers from other disciplines, and this almost became a window for me to introduce sociological theories, right? So the first part of the course was primarily structured around with this beautiful essay that Anne Market has. It's a very old essay, Sociological and Anthropological Approaches to Food and Nutrition. And I think it's a very useful essay to actually sum up all the debates and some of the major thinkers and take the students, be it undergraduate or postgraduate, about how food as an object of inquiry has been framed, right? And with that, I think we also get an opportunity to introduce students from other disciplines to structuralist approach, structuralist approach, symbolic approach, as well as the materialist approach. Now, when it comes to food, studying food through symbolism, it really becomes easier for students to connect, particularly because of food as symbolic of identity, right? But when it comes to the materialist approach, this is where, in my experience, I have seen students really struggle through the history. That what is the need of the history to study sociology? And one of the challenging readings, that I thought that was useful, students loved him by the end of it, but initially students resisted a little bit to study Sydney Mintz. And I'm flagging this because when it comes to designing a course on food, what are the readings that we can also introduce to also refresh some of the sociological theories? I think this is very, very important, because otherwise if we immediately go, and I'm saying this with some seriousness, because one of the assumptions that many students have, particularly undergraduate, that this is a course that's going to be a lot of fun, right? And I say, yes, there's going to be a lot of fun, but with fun, there is a lot of serious reading also we are going to do, right? And so I think food really becomes a very interesting way to go back to some of the classical debates, to actually make the students think that why is it, who started the journal, for instance, Sociological Bulletin? Why is the name of the journal Contributions to India? What is contributions? Who was contributing? Who are these thinkers? And I think what the first part of both the courses, be it in undergraduate or in postgraduate, I title it very simplistically, what are the major theoretical approaches. And I think that theoretical background also kind of makes students aware that when we really think about food, and this is also very interesting segue to really think to, with each of these thinkers, I keep on also adding that look at how this structuralist approach, do you think, what would be as analogous thinkers say in political science or in psychology or in other disciplines, if we are teaching in universities and milieus which have other interdisciplinaries, so that they can also make these readings useful for their own courses. This is one part of the story. When it came to offering the same sort of course as part of the MA Sociology program at my current university, South Asian University, I thought of focusing on three important aspects. One is taste, second is health, third is nutrition. Again, keeping in mind that these are the three thematics, students across South Asia will bring in their own different perspectives. I think one of the challenges or one of the benefits that some of us may have, where we have the freedom to design our curriculum, is to keep the students in mind. And many a times, I think for many of us, this would be the experience who have taught courses on food. Food is often offered as an elective course, right? So one of the lessons I have learned through those board of studies exercises, right, through the various review committee meetings of courses, etc., is not to kind of think of this course unconnected or unrelated to other courses, right? So wherever I have been invited to teach or review courses on food, this is one thing I have kept in mind, that can students relate and make cross connections, say with political sociology, economy and society, religion and society, social stratification, gender and society. I think when we introduce a text and there are many times, students have said, we have done culinary triangle. I said, okay, teach me culinary triangle in the food class, right? You have done it in the anthropology course, but let's see it in the food course. Let's try and substitute raw, cooked and food and rotten with food items from our context. So I think and with keeping this in mind, that how students can relate it to other courses, this is why I thought taste, health and nutrition has remained very, very central. One thing I think that is going to remain very, very important, particularly on sociological discussions of food and particularly teaching, is to really bring in, this is my viewpoint on nutrition, is to really kind of engage the students with the way nutrition data is collected. And this brings us really that food is used to discipline bodies, because many a time when students come to the classroom, they come with this impression, food brings people together. But I think this is one approach that I take, that, let's try and think of how food is used to discipline our bodies, and those bodies are gendered bodies, caste bodies. So how is food used to discipline both individual and collective bodies? And when we start thinking of food as a sort of a disciplinary regime, this time I went a little brave to begin the course with 2 famine readings, which students immensely enjoyed. One of the readings that we did on famine was memorialization around famine across the world, and how it's only women and children who are at the heart of this famine memorials. And from there, we went to a reading how the political rhetoric that emerged in pre-independent India was unity in diversity during famines, right? So food is not apolitical. All of us are teaching in universities in very unique circumstances. But so we cannot lose sight of the fact that food is very, very central to our political identity. And this is where I really pick up this very old, this reading, which talks about how unity in diversity as a political rhetoric actually emerges with the Bengal famine, and we look at the different political party debates. Moving from the cross connections, and particularly with this reading this time, for the first time I was very happy, right at the beginning of the course, students started making connections with other courses they had already completed in their first, second and third semester. So for me, even in one comment comes, ma'am, but we read it in other course this, I think there is some progress we have made. This is what, my takeaway is. The second, the second lesson I have learned from the classrooms of food is the fact that students share very personal experiences. And there is a way, I think Dr. Dutta also shared about this, that, I think the classrooms have to be made a very safe space so that students continue to share this personal experiences. And I'm saying this also because many a times those same comments can be seen as stereotyping the other. And many a times as pedagogues, when we are moderating a discussion, it may not reflect of our politics. And let me talk about this particular challenges, because I think what happens, particularly when students strongly feel about a food item and they say that, this is how I feel, this is how I think, this particular food was used to discriminate this section of population in that particular historical period, and how do we kind of build a sort of a dialogic exercise around it. And I'm heavily grateful to the students of the South Asian University who have participated in the course to actually train me to thinking about how to create this dialogic space. Because we design the curriculums, many a times I have taken opportunities like this to actually bring in a counter text. That if a student is, bringing in, one perspective, I literally have used this to bring in a counter text, and I always encourage students, don't make it your burden to fight with your friend. Let's fight it through the texts, right? So let's put the burden on someone who has devoted 5,000, 6,000, 2,000, 4,000, and it really becomes this immensely interesting exercise of one, we need to outshine the teacher. The second, I think they tend to read a lot more, and they make us read a lot more. I think that experience I have had with few batches. With one of the batches, I ran the entire course because they were a very adventurous batch. Some of them I think are there in the audience. We ran the course exactly like a seminar style, where every week they came ready with presentations. And that really kind of shifted the way in which the postgraduate classrooms really became engaging. In fact, we have co-authored a piece around it, because and this particular batch, instead of doing the regular food walks, what I had adopted in my work on smells, I had designed a sort of a smell walk, with the students, and I told the students that we are going to go for a smell walk, but what you're going to produce out of the classroom is not a smell walk on the cities of Old Delhi. You're going to think about either your village or your town or your city where you are from, and you are going to carve out your smell walk that has stayed with you. And through a series of exercise, they actually came up with smells of stigma. It was not planned, it happened. As the readings progressed, we started off with the smell map, which was very neatly done smell map. Then it became messy with our readings. And each of them, and I still remember one particular student said, "Ma'am, I don't have a map, but what I have is a mapping of the neighborhood through smell. Clearly seems like, I am from the majoritarian community." And I think that was a huge takeaway for me. And in the co-authored chapter that we have put together, it's still under review. That's why I couldn't share it. The students' map is not there, right? But we talk about the piece as smell map. The fourth thing that I wanted, and this is where I think, as Dr. Dutta said, that assignments really become a very interesting way. And I think in the food class, I have always thought about what is it they can take away, right? Like, how do we design assignments where they can take away and they can keep it? So maps have been one important part. The second exercise, which some of my students in Ambedkar University did, which I have not managed to replicate it anywhere, is I had asked this particular batch to keep a waste diary, to really map over a course of a week, where did the waste, what is the last track till which they can design the waste. Interestingly, some of them, their faculty members later told me, some of them use that same map in their third semester or fourth semester, I'm forgetting now, in the undergrad course. They used it in the urban courses to write their term paper on waste segregation, disposal, all of it, right? So I think, how do we kind of, because there is a lot of ways in which can we design assignments, particularly in today's time when there's a lot of pressure, keeping in mind that what is it students can take away, what is it they can keep it in a more tangible format, right? And this year, I think it was done with some other intent. I mean, we had, I said, okay, everyone has to write a memo and everyone has to write up one question every week, right? And this year, by the end of it, what I'm telling them is that with the questions that you have come up with throughout the course, we are going to end the course in another 2 weeks. I have told them that let's create a zine out of it. This is also my selfish way every year to learn one technique as part of the classroom. I really think that, classroom are co-learning spaces, and students have taught me how to record podcast. Students have really taught me to push my aesthetic boundaries sense. At one particular batch said, can we create a rap song? I said, I do not have that capability. If you can, most welcome. But keep me out of it, because you need some sensibility and I don't want to do a bad job at it. But I think what I have immensely enjoyed is the fact that, when bell hooks write that classrooms are transformative spaces, I have seen how a student who absolutely grew up in a vegetarian household. We were in the walk we went for a walk this year to Nizamuddin, and students said, doesn't matter, it's okay. Our food choices are not available, but this is a class exercise. I said, do you want to go to another place where we have other food choices? Only if time permits, ma'am. I think this acceptability of each other's choices is something that I hugely respect, that has come out of classrooms. The second thing, I think, and I think Ayeshna will agree with me, that the second thing I have learned from doing food walks is to literally encourage students. Every year I take them to some place and I tell one place you will not photograph, because I don't want it to make it a tourist hub, to make them question putting out everything on the digital media. I said, this is a nice place, enjoy it, experience it, sense it, and let it become part of your bodily archive, right? So these are the sort of pedagogical tools that are there. One of the things I have been struggling, and because I would like your inputs on this, one of the things that I have struggled is to make, and I would really appreciate if you have readings on the nutraceutical industry that is emerging in South Asia, right? I mean, we do have sort of examples and history of nutraceuticals, say Tata iodized namak, to Horlicks, to Boost, to all of this, right? But if there is any sort of a comprehensive literature, this is something, because I think a course on food really needs to bring in the discourses on health and how medicalized notions of food has entered our notions of edibility. While there's a lot of literature on organic farming, in pesticide-free farming, I think there's much less scholarship on nutraceuticals. And if any one of you have any cues around it, I think my students would benefit from it. So this is my selfish agenda to also kind of gather material. Lastly, one of the things, and with this submission I'll end my presentation, that when it comes to teaching food, I think, and I completely agree, that while our positionalities really become important, I think how do we ensure the safety of classrooms, particularly in this time and frame, so that students can talk about their positionality without fear of getting judged as well, right? And I think this is a huge responsibility we as pedagogues kind of have. I don't know whether we have gotten it all right, but one of the things I keep on telling myself is that every year I make it a point to make one mistake in the classroom, or it has happened. And I think with that mistakes, with students accepting my mistakes, I think it also becomes a sort of a safer space. And when I say, mistakes, I always start with, hey, in my undergrad days, I interpreted this text, this way. I was so naive that I did not look at this. And I think when we share our mistakes of interpreting a text, I think conversations also open up of multiple interpretations. While AI is part of the food industry, so far, I have had the huge opportunity or luxury to tell this, that in the food classrooms, maybe students enjoy the reading, or students just enjoy the reading or the thinkers that they get to read. There is much less use of AI in the food classrooms, and I'm very happy about that. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
hope I was within time, Rituparna.
Yeah. That's
Sorry,
okay.
sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Dr. Ishita, and again, for capturing the nuances of teaching in a classroom, especially when your pedagogical site is food. I think as someone who has been teaching a course on food for the last 2 years at IIT, I relate to so many observations that both you and Ayeshna made, and there's a lot of food for thought in terms of how we can use food, not just methodologically, but also theoretically, and primarily to think about our social world. I am especially, struck by the remark that you made that food should make students think about cross connections between other disciplinary papers and courses and sociology of food or food and culture. However, I would not speak a lot today, and I would rather have an opportunity to hear from participants who have joined us. So first, let me ask Leena to give some remarks, and then we will open up the floor for discussion.
Thank you, Rituparna, and thank you so much, Ishita and Ayeshna, for bringing so much to the table. Much to think about. Ishita, I was particularly struck by this idea of smell walks and waste diaries and how they connect waste diaries to a course on urban systems. I think that was fascinating. And absolutely, what you said, I mean, both you and Aishna have said this, that the need to have safe classrooms, inclusive classrooms, and not to judge. In fact, a very interesting thing that happened only last year was they were doing some of our students were doing a project on climate skills. And as part of that, we asked them if they could. The whole idea was to visit Machimar Nagar. There's Machimar Nagar, which is essentially a coolie community neighborhood in South Mumbai. And we also, of course, have students, for whom, and they said no. One of them said, it'd be difficult for me to go because my mother would not allow me to go. So I said, what is the problem if you go there? And another pitched in saying that, oh no, ma'am, no. I said, but how would your mother know? She said, no, no. And another immediately said, but ma'am, the smell of it. So I said, but you're not going to absorb the smell when you go to Machimar Nagar. So, it's interesting that in sociology classrooms, we also get to confront our biases. And one really says is all right, because even after teaching for so many years, there are these slippages that happen on our part as pedagogues. And therefore, you tell the students is all right, but it is important to know that how this has come out. And probably this is something that I need to be cognizant of. I mean, it's going to stay with me, perhaps. I am not saying that it's going to go away, but it's important to see how this bias may influence in the way I look at others. So the kind of things that both of you brought were very interesting, very nice, and one could relate to everything. Even though I don't teach a paper on food, as you rightly said, there is food in some paper or the other, and you're doing it. And so these are interesting ways to relate to. So thank you so much. And I don't think I'm going to take much time. We would want others to speak. I think Rituparna, some of our, I think Dr. Arvinder has joined us also. So we welcome you, Dr. Arvinder, who is, of course, the Secretary of Indian Sociological Society. Is she still here? I did see her. She was there. Anurekha is here. Wonderful to have Anurekha as well. Some of our participants here teach the paper on food, and if they would like to share something, Shilpi, for example, has taught. And you also mentioned about beauty. So maybe we could do that if they have some questions, comments, or simply share.
Yes. Yeah. So I think Professor Ansari is still here.
Okay.
And so is Professor Anurekha. So we open the floor for discussion.
Ritu, Leena, I'm there. Good evening, and I really, really enjoyed listening to both the panelists. It was a really very enriching experience, and also, was trying to, the food walks, especially the smell walks. We have these now culture of food walks in Jamia Nagar becoming very prevalent for its, Mughlai food and. So I was also thinking about politics of food, identity, the paper on ethnicity I teach, that how, these concerns are emerging, and how what Leena rightly pointed out, that we get to listen to the prejudices, biases, and also there are other versions, like for instance, we have Kareem in Delhi, which is very famous for Mughlai foods. And how this navigation between jhatka and halal, and how these experiences and these classroom talks. I am not an expert to comment on sociology of food, but I was relating it with the question of identity, politics of food, how when I teach paper in ethnicity, come across in a classroom situation. So thank you, and I would use this platform, if you allow me, Rituparna, to say that we want young scholars to engage in these discussions, and the ISS platform is open. and these links would be provided, we'll be very happy. And I really appreciate the way Ritu has been doing that, organizing series of lectures along with RCs. So we really request all those who are present here that we request you to, use this platform more frequently for connecting with the students and scholars and teaching fraternity. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ansari, for the kind words. Actually, before you joined, I had shared the links to Leena's RC and our ad hoc group, and especially the Pedagogue Chronicles that RC1 had brought out, which was released as part of the 50th AISC. You can check those links out. Also, check the membership link out. As Professor Ansari has suggested, we really want younger people to engage with sociological questions, irrespective of your research interests. Leena, I think what you said summed up what the two panelists have been trying to say so well, as Professor Ansari's insights. We will open up the floor for comments, insights, questions, whatever you may have. You are free to type them in the chat box, or you can also unmute yourself and ask the speakers or share your insights.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, Shilpi, go ahead.
Yeah, hello. Hello, Ayeshna. Hello, Ishita. Very good evening. And that was a very, very, wonderful talk and very rejuvenating actually for this evening. Um, you know, um, I was just thinking because both of you have talked about how, I'm assuming that you have the opportunity to design your own course and curriculum, especially Ishita, you teach in a postgraduate and PhD curriculum, in courses. For many of us, like me, we teach in a structure that where the curriculum is already given. And with the introduction of the NEP, the 5-hour lectures are reduced to 3 hours lectures per week now. And with the length of syllabus, many of us actually have to rush through the course. So in such situation, yes, although we have a CA component now, and that gives us opportunity and a lot of agency to also do, some of the things that the way we might want to do. But also there is a lot of pressure that the students also finish the course and curriculum. That is one point, I think, one challenge I think we as pedagogues always face in a structure where, where it is given, the course and curriculum is given. The second challenge I think I have encountered, and I think many of us would also agree, and both of you have mentioned, the kind of very tricky political situation scenario we are ought to take our courses and classes. And there are times when we have to encounter and navigate the challenging part of, or the uncomfortable part of engaging or teaching food. And I'm still trying to figure out how, teachers like me, like for example, I'm in a guest position. I keep telling this, you're in a very precarious position. How far can you be political? How do we really navigate such circumstances and situations? I'm still trying to think very hard and loud. But undoubtedly, as Ayeshna says, that there is hope. There is always hope. I think, this is, not a question, but just trying to think out loud. How do we deal with it? Thank you very much once again.
Can I address the question?
Yes, Ishita, go ahead.
Shilpi, I'm calling you Shilpi. So if it's okay. Shilpi, I think your second question is very important, and I think relevant to and central to pedagogy, right? Because today, the way in which, why did I choose to start this year's course on famine? Because many countries are going through man-made famines in their own sort of a way, or there is a fear of food crisis in many, many geographies. How do I make students reflect about it and very very selfishly, Shilpi, I am going back to history. I'm going back to history to ask those questions, and I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I completely agree with you that how and in it, that when it comes to, and this is a question that many of my friends, when they teach the food course, if I have slipped, like they have asked for readings, when I've shared readings, they're like, there's no time to include this particular reading, but I think students would have resonated. One of the things I have started doing, Shilpi, and I think this year I completely failed, because I also realized all those experiments work very well in smaller classrooms. And smaller classroom size by mean that, like for instance, the course that I have designed on food, it's great with 15 students. This time, moment the number went to 28, I felt I can't take them to a food walk, because 28 in a neighborhood is almost like, some tourism going on, right? So, and I think we need to be really, really cautious about how we approach that. Breaking them into groups, Shilpi, is not possible, because time frame, there's only so much of time, the semester. But at the same time, I have, there is one experiment a friend did, and this is what I'm trying to learn from her. She's also now turning, many of the readings into podcast. If she fails to teach them in classroom, she gives, combines some of the readings and converts them into a sort of a podcast with her voice and uploads it, right? But she's also in a management school where there is where there is this sort of freedom sort of exists. I have not used it so far of converting my reading into podcast, but she also uses this to encourage students to presentations, because with the class size increasing, 50-60 students can't be presenting all at the same time. So her method is to encourage students to turn it into podcasts so that they're still present, but there is a sort of a recorded file that to go back to. So, but Shilpi, the second question I think is pertinent to all our lives. And thank you so much, Professor Ansari, for the smell walk. Smell walk has been, it's been challenging, but it's been very, very rewarding. I think what I got to learn about the neighborhoods of Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, I don't think so I would have learned about it if it were not from the smell walk perspective.
You, Ishita. Ayeshna, you also teach at a college. Would you like to respond to that?
So I definitely agree with what Shilpi is saying, and she herself talks about the pedagogy of hope in the classroom. So, I think that with a structured curriculum, with a lot of surveillance, it definitely is very, very challenging. But I feel that, as Dr. Ishita is saying, that one reading or that one creative exercise, or even some as anything that you can probably bring in the classroom, probably can create a ripple, which will be enough for students to think about food in a way that probably you want them to think about. So yeah, that's all.
Thank you. So, is there any other question or anybody else who would like to share their insights?
Hi, can I?
Hi, Anurika. Yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leena and Rituparna, for planning this. And as I said, Ishita, so good to see you. And hello, Ayeshna. I really enjoyed the talk, and this is something just I'm sharing. I don't teach on food, so I mean I don't have nor I research on food. So, but I have a friend called Medha Kale, and she earlier used to work with the Pari as translating English into all those. And she was teaching a course at this Tuljapur on gender sustainable livelihood and things like that. But while we were talking about many things, she shared an interesting story or a technique that she used. where she said that one way also to understand how different housing societies deal with food is also, like, for example, within Maharashtra, you know that they have a segregation in terms of like waste, like wet waste and dry waste. So so you have these women who go and collect waste from different housing societies, and they also give a very interesting insight with regard to how people from different housing societies where they live have a very different relationship to food. So what they were saying is, from the big housing societies, like gated communities and things like that, you will find that people throw away like edible food, like in boxes, they'll just completely throw away. But if you go to like slums and things like that, there'll be like waste, like प्याज का छिलका, आलू का छिलका. You won't find food being thrown. So one interesting way of to look at also the sociology of food is also not to look at what we are consuming, but also what we think as waste and what we think as edible, which could also be seen from the perspective of those who are handling the waste also. So in terms of insights, it is not only the teacher, not only the reading, not only the students who would be an interesting site of sharing their journeys or engagement with the food, but also those who labor with not only preparation, but also the cleaning of it. So I think somewhere there could be something that talks, of course, about class, of course, about caste, gender, also with regard to the way that we are so consumed with ordering food and then wasting food without even thinking, and things like that. So yeah, just a small, because yeah, it anyway, all very interesting. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Anurekha. Yeah, Ishita, you
Anurekha, that
wanted
was a
to add
very
something.
interesting, sorry, that was a very
Anurekha,
interesting
yeah.
observation. Very interesting.
So good to see you after a really,
Yeah.
really long time. Anurekha, like if I can just take 2 minutes. One of the students, and I'm talking here about, someone who is an undergraduate. When she put together this waste diary, I was quite mesmerized, because I kept on saying at every stage, you have to introduce a human voice, whatever way you map it, because like right in second or third semester is very, without research methods course, I don't want to jump them to go and to interview people. I'm a little scared of that, right? So, but what interestingly came out was the fact that at that time, the sociology students, I think in some other course they were taking, I had already introduced census, right? And what they did was, they combined themselves into groups and they tried to find out that, because repeatedly some familiar only certain kinds of names they had not heard in their growing up milieu, they were hearing it for the first time. Because I said, they every week they had to just show me the diary, and I used to say, okay, find out what is this bhaiya, like find out what's the full name of the bhaiya, so my one comment was, find out the full name of bhaiya, find out full name of didi, and from when have these terms didi and bhaiya have come into being for this body of laborers, right? One student actually mapped how the waste, through this waste labor, how much, and I still remember it was, I don't know what the student did with that, but she did a sort of a Saturday, Sunday, she did 1 hour by hour how much food waste is getting generated, and who is wasting it and who is in turn putting it in the dustbin. So 1 week's analysis was, my mother seems to be dumping all the waste, and all the male members of the family, including me, is generating waste. This is what, the student and her brother, she also got her brother to also contribute to the diary. I said it now, and later on she actually kind of came up with a method that she will do it time wise. What is the maximum time that the household uses to throw off the waste? And does that end up determining who comes to collect the waste? Right? So very interesting questions actually came up from different neighborhoods of Delhi, which I also had not imagined. So you're absolutely right. I think questions of caste and labor really becomes very, very central when we teach them.
So I think as part of building a sense of self, who I identify as, similar to what you said, Anurika, that, looking at what we are discarding, looking at not just food in terms of what I like to eat, but also looking at something that I consider as dirty. So someone will say that, for me, blood is dirty. But then the other student will say, for me, fish smell is dirty, right? For someone else, looking at the dustbin of the kitchen can be dirty. So these ideas also show where you come from and who you are sharing the classroom space with. So yeah.
I mean, absolutely. And I think what was very interesting about both your presentations was the fact that how something that we think as very routine and mundane, um, and we don't think so much about food, especially in terms of, either celebration or in my university, it is, cribbing about hostel food. Keeping that aside, but I think the whole political economy of food and its relationship to other social structures, I think, and the kind of pedagogies that you have, introduced in your classroom. But I would have to say that some of them, I have a class of 75, so some of things won't work. But yeah, I mean, it really gives a very interesting insight. Yeah, thank you so much.
I wanted to add something to the discussion. So I think along with the pedagogies, the text also make a lot of difference because when I teach at the University of Delhi and we talk about caste, people seem to relate instantly. But when I'm doing the same at a classroom now, an MA classroom at TIS Guwahati, none of them relate to caste. But when I tell them that, I want to teach you Dolly Kikon, a race and food, they instantly relate because that is their social reality. And caste is something which is there. It's not that it isn't there, but it's not the immediate thing that they connect with. And they don't connect with how Indian society is taught at the level of maybe Delhi University. So there are a lot of interjections that you have to make in terms of the text as well. I've seen this with the cohort that I have taught for the last 2 years, especially on food, that if you give them a good combination of classical and new text, then they are really into it because they also see the course as valuable. I think there's been a lot written on how pedagogy is now focused on skill development, and there's also criticism of it. I agree, but many of them do come to interdisciplinary classrooms with this idea that we want to take back skills. And they will also ask you questions like, why are you against skills? So in that sense, I also feel that when you give them a mix of classical and modern contemporary texts, they do better in terms of receptions, participation, etc. And somehow that, works out well. So there's a lot in terms of the text as well, according to the regions. I think a universal syllabus simply doesn't work in that sense. Yeah, Leena, you wanted to add something?
No, I think I can post it to the end. Anyone else who would like to speak? Participants, students are here who have been part of the course on food. Would you like to share some of your insights? I think Ishika said her students are here. I can see some of our students are here. It would be good to.
Someone
Yes,
has raised her
Deepshika.
hand.
Yes, Deepshika.
Hi everyone. Hi Ishita ma'am. It's so nice to see you again. I really wanted to share the experience of doing the class on food with ma'am. Is one thing. So I'm doing a PhD in STS, and I wouldn't have found out about any of the STS canonical literature if it wasn't through the food class. And whenever, like right now, whenever someone asks me, oh, how did you get introduced to STS? And I tell them, oh, it's because of this course on food, they get so surprised that I did not read Laboratory Life of Bruno Latour first. It was Pasteurization of France that came to me first. So when ma'am was talking about this, making like cross connections, I think the general assumption is that like food studies is narrow, but it's so vast and it's so wide and it's connected to so many kinds of literature, that it introduced me to new bodies of work and new theories that really helped me shape my research interest, which is not directly related to food, but I draw so much from the literature that I got to learn in that course. Thank you.
That's so good to hear that you're doing a PhD in STS, but the inspiration came actually from a class on sociology of food. That's also some food for thought for you, Ayeshna,
Yes,
because with your STS thing,
interesting.
yeah. And what I also liked is how Ayeshna brought in the idea of affect, embodiment, and care, and ethics of care in the classroom. Absolutely. Um, Anyone else? Any question, comment, or would you like to share some experience?
I think we can wind up.
Yes, we can
Yes.
close. We can
Yes.
wind up. Absolutely. It has been very nice, rich discussions. Yes, Rituparna, you were saying something?
No, I agree, and we can wind up. Yeah, maybe you
Yeah,
can
and I
go
think
ahead.
I would like to thank our speakers, the panelists, for a very, very rich discussion. And I think there have been significant takeaways for everybody, especially for me. I learned a lot. And probably we can do, I was just thinking we can do a series because there's so much on food that actually has to be, that could be discussed, especially in terms of the processes of exclusion, othering. And, some of it, of course, was discussed today. How does one, Shilpi, for example, raised a very important thing. Food is so political, especially given the times that we live in. And given the precarity of positions, our positions as faculty members, then how does one maintain that balance? How does one navigate that space can be quite fraught, and how does one navigate that? I think these are very important pedagogical issues that we can probably take up in ad hoc RC1. I was just thinking about it. So thank you to the both of you. Thank you to Rituparna for moderating the session so well. Thank you to Anurekha, for participating. And thank you, Professor Arvinder, for joining in the discussion, and to Deepshikha. And it was very nice listening to each one of you, and looking forward to more of these sessions, when we can bring up very important issues pertaining to the classroom. And Ishita, I really, really enjoyed. There were so many things that you brought to the table. Ayeshna, thank you so much for adding some very valuable insights. And we look forward to more such discussions. Rituparna, in case you would like to add something.
Just a quick thank you to you and the panelists as well as the audience. That's it. Yeah.
I'm glad that finally we made this happen, because we have been
Yes.
discussing about this for a very long time. And, we were
Yes.
trying to see if we could get someone from the South as well. We wanted a nice thing, some representation from different parts of the country. But we tried, but someone was not available. And hopefully we can do more of this later.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you to
Thank
everybody
you,
for
everyone.
joining in.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, and take care.